Hi there, and welcome to the ATS podcast with me, Will Brown, and John Soulsby, where we break down chunks of health and fitness information into bite-sized pieces, remove a bunch of the noise, and just leave what's relevant. Today, on episode number 60, we are talking about the science of elite athletes. So, what kind of stuff makes elite athletes different from just everyday Joe blogs?
Genetics.
Pretty much.
Soz.
Yeah, pick better parents. Depends. I think I always argue that it depends on the sport. Sports with a high tactical element, which would be like, well, tactics, obviously. But I think you tend to see a lot wider genetic variance in sports that have a tactical element because it allows
Yep.
for people without the genetic qualities that would come with a decent, like, kind of elite performer model to kind of get their way and kind of wangle things.
Yep.
But there's really no tactics in the 100 meters, so you're really
Yes,
probably
that's...
not going to be beating Usain Bolt sprints. The I
Although
don't.
even that is like kind of wild because it's like I don't know anywhere near enough about sprinting, but Usain Bolt was apparently terrible biomechanically for the 100-meter sprint, and everyone's like, "Nah, he's not gonna be that great because he's too long or something like that."
Well,
And then he's like, "Ah, lol jokes, lads."
yeah,
I
I
lost.
think people underrated because I was looking up his specific stats the other day just because the
Because
question
of that
arrived.
age-old question.
Yeah, that question arrived in the group chat of
Yeah.
if you, or what was it? Where it is? You can start. Yeah, you have to race record pace Usain Bolt. You win 100 grand if you beat him, and you can get a head start in 10-meter increments. And for every 10-meter increment head start you take, you lower the prize by 10 grand. And it's like,
Yeah.
where do you start? So like, if you take 50 grand, you take 50-meter head start, you start on the 50, he starts on the 0, and you've still got to beat him to the 100. And let me
Not
tell you,
happening.
callers, that's not fucking happening.
I think I'd start. I think starting on the 80. I think I'd be with you on that.
So yeah, I think what a lot of people, again, this is just an assumption based on Usain Bolt's, I mean, physical appearance and also splits and how he breaks down the run, is that a lot of typical sprinters will build up to top speed within the first like kind of 40 meters, 50 meters, and
Yeah.
then just attempt to maintain slash not lose as much as possible for the last 50.
Yeah.
Like they accelerate extremely rapidly and then attempt to maintain top speed for as long as possible. Usain Bolt, because of his big long ass limbs, very much started quite slow. I'm pretty sure almost all of his like winning 100 meters do not, like, he doesn't get to the front of the pack until about halfway or the last third
Yeah.
because he naturally has a much easier time maintaining close to top speed once he gets to stride out and stops taking those kind of very short, explosive, choppy steps in the beginning. So yeah, he just takes a little while longer to build up to top speed. Like his fastest splits are between 50 meters and 90 meters.
Because then he cruises the last 10.
Yeah, he does cruise the last 10. Although his last 10 is slower than his first 20. His first 30, in fact.
Is it?
Yeah, like
Is
his
he
10
cruising?
meters, his 10-meter splits don't drop significantly until 30 to 40 meters on and onwards.
Yeah.
Like it takes him almost 2 seconds to run the first 10 meters. In fact, it actually takes him almost 3 seconds to run the first 20 meters, which is
Oh,
quite
that's terrifying how
which is
fast he is
quite
after that.
wild. Yeah. And then the rest of the time he is under a second per 10 meters. You're like, ugh, that's so fast. Like you genuinely would struggle to start at the 80 and run the
Yeah.
last 20 meters by the time he catches you, which is terrifying. But yes, on topic, the science of elite athletes is largely a genetic component. The sports tend to self-select for people that are elite genetically at them. Like I
Yeah.
thing, like the argument of like Michael Phelps, like there's a lot of kind of chat and discourse regarding genetic factors in sport participation and classification, just around transgender athletes and competing in sports and various things. And people always cite things like Michael Phelps has like absolutely turbo long arms and is like essentially as like as about as hydrodynamic as a human can be, along with like essentially paddles for arms.
Hmm.
And you're like, yes, but that's kind of why he is so good at swimming. Like you just don't see very many short-armed, dense humans in the pool doing well because your hips go very low, your hydrodynamism goes down, and your stroke force is terrible. And it's like if you have to pull double the strokes to get the same distance as somebody else, can get them in like like half your strokes, you're probably not gonna have a good time swimming.
Yeah.
It's like unsurprisingly, you also see quite long-armed, very muscular people in rowing because they have extremely long stroke distance, like very efficient stroke lengths, and a propensity to hold on to a whole heap of muscle that allows them to row very efficiently for certain periods of time. It's, yeah, it's not wild. Weightlifting tends to favor cubes.
Yeah.
Like if you are essentially a cube of a human that is incredibly short and just enormously muscular, especially after training, then there you go.
I think after just raw genetics, the next thing is just like unbelievable consistency.
Yeah, the next big thing
Um,
is just consistency of training. Like big
like
Tony Cliff.
Sam,
Tony Cliff had
yeah.
that where he was on about it was in a I was in a group chat with him for a powerlifting competition that I was doing the admin for, and someone asked him how he benches, like how on earth he's managed to bench over 200. They've just hit their first 200 and just about died doing it.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Nah, like do 5 by 5 for 18 years." You're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, that'd do it."
that'll do it.
Yeah, strength
Um,
train for 18 years.
yeah, like Sam Warburton, ex Wales international
Bread guy.
captain. Hi, big red guy. But he was talking about that recently in the lead up to the World Cup of just consistency of training and like France are, as an example, I suppose, are widely renowned as one of the best teams at the moment. Their two of their hookers have been playing in the front row together since they were 10 years old. And
Duh.
they're like 20, 23, 24. I can't remember how old, but they're, it's like, funnily enough, they're fucking good because
Yeah,
they've been doing the same thing and in this example together since they were 10.
yeah. I think the
And it's
rugby's
like, that is unbelievable. And
oh
they've been
yeah,
in training, like, obviously in the weight room and everything since probably not 10, but um, again, just like unbelievable consistency and want. It's rare to find people that want to do the same thing
yeah.
for a decade, like every week, multiple times a week for 10 years.
I think that's the big one. Is that like the training can be like it will be varied somewhat, but really not. Like
But not really.
yeah, like rugby doesn't really get much different. Like the rules are all
No.
kind of the same. Like you pass the same kind of ball about. Like you're in the same or roughly the same position. Like playing on the field.
Yep.
That's kind of your lot. Like you really have to have the kind of drive to do that for decades to really hit like a kind of peak. Although rugby is a good example of where you have people that will very often break the kind of, I guess, elite performer mold, especially when you have a diversity of positional demands in a rugby team and
Hmm.
stuff. Same with American football. Like you have
Yeah.
different, like
American football's a bit better, so, but yeah,
there's no 300-pound wide receivers. Like it's just not a thing.
no.
But similar, you've got folk like Faf de Klerk playing, like I don't know if he's not the captain of this team, but he's like scrum
No.
half.
Yeah,
F-
very pivotal person. Yeah. But
yeah,
he's like, you
tiny.
wouldn't pick him off the street. As I mean, you would if you knew him, but you know what I mean. Like, if zero context, you probably wouldn't pick him as an international rugby player who is one of the most physical bastards in the circuit.
Yeah,
Um,
he weighs 80 kegs. and plays
Yeah.
international rugby. And like at any position, 80 kegs is small.
Yeah. Mm. But yeah, consistency is the next one. Just unbelievable consistency and a bit of luck not to get catastrophic injury really early on.
Yeah. He's also 5'5". I did not actually know his height. He just always looks
Ah, he's
small.
tooty.
That is very small
He always looks small because he's
next
beside
to everyone.
6'7".
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So yeah, I
again,
mean that's pretty much the two main keys.
yeah, genetics and stuff, genetics and consistency of training, like over time. There's even like young athletes and stuff have been training a while. Like you see this in powerlifting a lot with like up and coming juniors, and you're like, oh, they're juniors, so they're between 18 and 23. But realistically, if you're an 18-year-old who's been training since they were 14, that's still like 4 years of training. Like if you have any moderate genetic potential, like you can really get quite good in 4 years.
Yeah.
If you consistently train for 4 years.
Or like there's one, he's literally just left the juniors downhill mountain bike guy, he Jackson Goldston, but it's his first year out of juniors, and I think he's currently third overall with like
That's
3
wild.
races left in the year. But there's videos of him at like 2 and 3 years old on a balance bike hitting jumps, and you're like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
so he's been 20 years riding bikes,
Yeah, that'll do it.
like
Like,
every day. Like, oh my god.
yeah, I think it's also why part of decent like sports development stuff is like talent identification and getting folks into sports. Like I was watching someone linked me a clip of Jeff Capes from back in the day, the
Hmm.
world's strongest guy, but he from the UK, but he was a shot putter. Like he would do a
Right.
lot
Yeah.
of kind of like throwing events. And
Hmm.
they were talking about how he started in school, or like he got into it in school. You're like, what schools these days are letting kids chuck shot and discus
Yeah.
and hammer? Like, it's one of those of like, if you don't really know that that's a thing and you're a kid, like, unless somebody like picks you out and is like, you might be good at this, like, you might want to try
Yeah.
this, you're never gonna be exposed to those kinds of sports. The same with like snow sport stuff, like winter sports. I
Winter
mean,
sports, especially, that's luck.
very much so. I mean, all
Um,
the classic, the very classic, completely scientific documentary of the Jamaican bobsleigh team, uh, from like a bunch of
cool runnings.
on the bubble 100-meter racers from Jamaica who end up being the Jamaican
Yeah.
bobsleigh team. But it's a reasonable example of talent identification. Like if you have folk who
Yeah.
are like just on the bubble of other stuff, they might actually be better suited to other sports that they just don't know are about.
Yeah.
Like nobody's like, oh, I want to like watch, like nobody grows up doing the modern like the modern pentathlon or whatever it is. Like
Yeah. I
they have
think,
to
yeah,
get
especially
picked.
in more niche sports, it is like there's an element of luck if you got to find the right one
Yeah.
early.
But yeah, in summary, the science of elite athletes is very
Genetics and
consistent.
consistency.
Yeah, very consistent and non-stupid training for a long period of time combined with advanced to elite levels of genetics, and then you will have elite performers. You can obviously mess that up, but you know, when people don't, you end up with world champs.
Yeah.
But it's also a bit naive to think that the only difference between you and the world champion in your sport is that they do there's one weird trick. They don't.
This one weird trick of better parents.
Yeah, I can assure you none of it's weird. It's almost all like there'll even be cases where people on the amateur level are actually working harder than some elite performers and are just not getting there. And
Yeah.
that's just how it goes sometimes. Right, we'll catch you guys in the next one.